There we are. We're live.
Woo,
Hello, Melissa.
exciting. Hello.
Yeah, and welcome to everybody that's watching live on LinkedIn, and welcome to anybody that watches it later on Spotify or YouTube as well. So, Melissa, I'm really, really grateful for you giving up your time this morning to have this conversation. And there's been quite a lot of interest as well online, which is cool, which I'm only assuming is because of like your presence. It's nothing to do with me. Everybody wants to hear you talk.
Not at all. I think it's a joint effort, but I think it's more good conversation to be had. Is it going to be great?
Absolutely. And today we're going to talk about values is like the core of the topic. And just to put a little bit of context in for people watching, you and I were both at an event. It was a C2C event in March. I think you remembered. I couldn't remember when it was.
Yeah.
And we were both on panels. You were on a panel talking about branding, and I was on a panel talking about leadership. And as I sat down and I listened to you talk, I thought, oh my word, when you talk about values, on that occasion in relation to brand, you could have been saying what I would say about a person. And I found that fascinating because, well, maybe we'll get into this, but can you fake values and that kind of thing? So that's what we're here for. But before we get into that, just for anybody who, like been living under a rock and doesn't know who Melissa Match is, like, who is Melissa?
I just say, I think I've worn the wrong jumper today because I'm getting hot under the collar already, under the deep questions straight away.
Yeah. Do you need to lie down?
Who is Melissa at 10 a.m.? So in terms of who I am a mom of two. I always lead with that because they are my life. I also have two fur babies, two little dogs. One of them is a 14-week-old puppy, which is fun times. So incredibly family orientated, value driven, and kind of know my own personal values as well. But then in terms of what I actually do, I run a brand agency called Ember. And we're all about igniting the fire within passionate founders, entrepreneurs, business owners, founding teams. Kind of that thing. When you choose to do a business, you have a fire inside of you. It's not the easy option, but there's that thing that you have to do and have to get out to the world. We work with that internally, and then we put it externally to make the rest of the world sit up and pay attention. So we do all the pretty colors and the fonts and the logos, that stuff. But to me, true brand building starts from the inside and then we go out, which is why I think there's a lot of synergies with what we talk about. So I don't work with personal brands, very much business brands. Mm-hmm. However, I refuse to separate the founders or the business owner from the business brand itself, because without a passionate team or, really clear vision, the business brand doesn't exist. So it always starts with the person and ultimately what they bring to the table first before we start pointing out to the world. So that's just kind of a little bit about what I do, but also I think you can tell why I do it, why I'm quite passionate about it.
Absolutely, the passion comes through. And you just told me before we got started here that you've been at this for 5 years.
So independent brand strategist for about 3 years, and then Ember as an agency has been 2 years. We've just had our second anniversary. So yeah.
So where did the fire come from inside you to not want to just get a salary job? And
I had a salary job. So my background, big brands, Mars, Starbucks, 20th Century Fox, did the whole big brand thing. Obsessed with brand, obsessed with how we can get people to really connect to something. And actually I started off in sales. So really understanding how you sell something through brand building, through the power of brand. Loved all of that, obsessed with it. However, felt a bit like a square peg in a round hole in corporate. Knew I just didn't quite fit. I just knew I had something else. I wanted ultimately to make a bigger impact. So decided when I had the girls, 7 and 8 now, to do coaching. I love coaching, love psychology and people, which really builds into brand building, kind of understanding people. And then kind of combine the brand building piece with the people piece, and just thought, I'm going to give this a shot. I'm going to give this a go. And as I started going into this entrepreneurial world, I realized so many business owners were building brands the wrong way. So you take it for granted in these big brands as a set way of doing things and strategy, and really kind of process driven, but emotive driven. We make people feel something. When you come into the entrepreneurial world, there just seems to be this big gap, and people thought brands was, literally a logo and go and get some beautiful photography and you'll be fine. And I just found people were missing this huge piece of the puzzle. And I just knew I wanted to be the fit of that, but equally understanding that founders do it for a reason. So it kind of all just merged into this one. I thought we're going to just put it out there and see what happens.
And it seems to be pretty successful. You're still enjoying it. You've still got that energy.
I love what I do. And I think, do you know what it is? It's working with founder-led businesses. I think I've really figured out I don't just want to work with a marketing exec that gets the salary.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've just figured out me first. And then I've just aligned the business to that. So I know that I'm a fiercely passionate person and I get really excited when someone else is really passionate. So I don't care. It could be stamps. It could be craft beer. It doesn't really matter. If you're passionate about what you do, like let's chat. And so if you're a business owner and you're building something yourself, like that gets me excited. So if I'm always feeling that way, then I'm just going to keep doing it, to be honest. Because I think that's half the battle. Because it's hard, isn't it? Doing your own thing. It's tough. It's really tough.
It certainly is.
Yeah.
Having done it myself in the last, well, for me, I only went full time doing this on January the 1st, really.
Oh my God. I didn't realize it was so soon. So that's so cool.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I found that desire within myself, and it took me a couple of years of having that moment that I have to do this to actually getting to that point, or maybe like 18 months. I think it's probably more like 2 years now.
Yeah.
So I know exactly what you're talking about, that if you find something within yourself, and for me to find out quite later in life as well, I think I was probably 48 when I first started to think about these things. And to shift from a salary, pretty good salary. I had a national job in the health service. That's reasonably well known in a corner of the health service, with a big mortgage and 4 kids, and to go, right, I'm going to try and figure this out. So I totally get that there's sometimes something happens inside you, that when you talk about that fire inside, I get that. Maybe I'm just thinking for some of the people that are joining today, like, I know this question doesn't really have an easy answer, but when you say brand, what do you mean?
Brand, when you normally say brand, people think external stuff. Mm-hmm. Brand is actually how you make people feel. It's the perception that other people have of you. And I say you, it could be you as an individual, your personal brand, it could be your business brand. But essentially, it's what the perception is. So that perception is about the hearts and minds. So it's like, what are people thinking about you? So if they say your name or your business name, what are people thinking when they say it? How do you make people feel? And all of this happens without potentially you even being in the room. So it's that perception becomes a reality. Now, where brand building steps in is you already have a brand. You have a personal brand right now. The difference is, are we curating it? So if you're just leaving it to chance, then that brand is whatever it is, right? And people are going to think and perceive you in whatever way they want to perceive you. Brand building is about shaping that perception through specific strategies and storytelling and lots of different components. But it ultimately, for me, there's loads of different definitions, but for me, it's about making people think and feel something in a way that you want them to think and feel. That makes sense. So perception is the perception that people have of you or your business.
That's fantastic. And it goes into all sorts of different areas, doesn't it, as well? I mean, I had an example. I was talking to somebody else that works in branding recently, Danielle Clark, who I think you were on the panel with Danielle.
His message this morning, in fact, on my post.
Fantastic. So, and I was just sharing a story about, I won't say the name, a really big brand who make, let's say, protein powders and things like that. Okay, very well known, very well known brand, and they have sort of 3 months in a row, I feel, sort of tricked me into a subscription. Right? That is smart to one extent, but I've now told 10 people that. So that is an example of where that's nothing to do with a logo. It's nothing to do with how you behave, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it seems to me like that particular brand has shifted away from good product, good service to how can we turn this wheel. The priorities have shifted and you can sense it. So that is that for you like another example of how brand is not a logo. So it's not just a logo.
Yeah, so for me, I think it's a process, and I'm
Mhm.
quite structured in the way I think about brand building because it all starts from the inside, the foundation. So you've probably heard people talk about your purpose, vision, mission, values, like that foundation stuff. We can go into that. Then you kind of got the storytelling and your positioning, brand personality, tone of voice. All of these things are different components that build the brand. Then you've got your visuals, so your fonts, your colors, your logos, image style, brand patterns, all of that visual stuff. But then what happens is it becomes, okay, what are the marketing assets, websites, or the customer client touch points, your client experience, the gifts you might give. So essentially your brand is built up of all these different, what I would call micro experiences or micro stories. And collectively, email marketing, every different touch point, and you can do this for yourself. So whoever's like watching, map out every single touch point where your business, your brand, or you interacts with your audience. Every single experience comes together because our brains are really smart. They come together and they create a picture of what the brand is. So you can have an amazing product, but if they have a really, I'll try not to swear, bad customer experience, or the returns policy doesn't weigh up, or whatever it is, that damages their brand. So it doesn't matter how good the product is or the logo, like that will damage their brand reputation. So for me, brand, what I love doing is making people see from just looking down at this thing to actually thinking about this whole ecosystem that you can control and you can develop, but it's so much bigger than what we do or the thing that you're selling, your product or your service. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense to me.
Huge. It's massive. So it can be as big as you want it to be, ultimately.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have to do a whole series of these things. We can't do it all in 30 minutes.
I love it. Pick one topic.
Pick one, yeah. Don't go too deep and broad, Stephen, at the same time.
That's why I get excited, because it's so big and there's so much potential for growth. And it's so personal as well to the different businesses. So yeah, it's exciting when you get into it.
And that's where I want to go now. So you mentioned that you love working with founder-led businesses. So let's say you were meeting somebody new, and they run a business. They've got 2 or 3 employees. They've grown a little bit. They've got to a certain point, and then they've gone, "Oh, we need a logo," which I'm sure is how it gets approached quite a lot of the time. But on the values piece, how do you help that founder to understand their own values?
A good point. Good question. I think before we get to the values, I would always start with your purpose. So you'll have a personal purpose, and purpose means why. Essentially, you've heard probably, ask why 6-7 times until you get to the real core root of why are you doing this thing. And I think it's really important to understand your personal why. So keep saying, why am I doing this? Why is it important? And ultimately, you'll get down to usually something like freedom, self-actualization, accomplishment, whatever that thing is for you. And that's really important to give you the momentum to keep going when it's hard. But then when it comes to a business, it's similar. It's not the same, but it's similar. And you need to sort of think, why are we doing this? Why are we doing something that ultimately is not about the monetary gain? Obviously, everyone's in business to make money, but there's always got to be a reason that is bigger than the money side. So we start off with understanding that. That gives context and actually a little bit of direction. Then what you start to think about is, okay, your values. I think the first thing is to understand, what is a value? It's a word that's bandied around a lot, but for me, I use it in the sense or the context of like a moral compass. So it becomes a guide, a tool, a compass to direct you and your behaviors that will ultimately become a bit of a filter for everything you do. So every decision, every piece of content, every conversation or sales meeting should go through this filter of your values. If it ain't in the value set or it doesn't align, you should not be doing it. Even if this client that you really want is going to give you £1 million, if it goes against your values and what you believe in as a business, your moral compass, in theory, unless it's a short-term tactic, you should say no. So that's kind of how I envisage and use values. So I think everyone has different definitions. That's fine. And then there's 3 things that your values need to be. Number 1 is unique. they can't be generic. They can't be something that every business would have. For example, good quality. Everyone wants good quality, or good customer service, or respectful, or trustworthy. Those sort of words don't mean a great deal, because no one would want the opposite. No one would want to be untrustworthy or unloyal or whatever. You can use similar, but we want to try and make the values unique and ownable by you. So first thing is they've got to be unique. The second thing, they've got to mean something to you. So for example, one of my values is actually I'm quite challenging, like being challenging, and actually growth is another one. They mean something to me because I do it. I believe in them. I think, it's something that I put meaning on, and it's not just something I say. So they've got to be meaningful to you, and you can actually relate it to something in your business. And then the third thing is they've actually got to be directional. So like, just use that what was it? I did challenge one or growth one, for example. Growth, let's say growth is one of my values. They're directional because it will effectively help me to make decisions. So when I've hired employees, for example, I put in their benefits package, I pay for personal development for my employees. That we have a set budget every year, and I pay for that because growth is one of my personal values, but also our business value. It's like, how do we direct how we operate, how we show up in a way that aligns to who we are? And ultimately, values should be so unique that actually you put it on another business, you give these values to someone else, and they might not fit, it might not make sense. So I think I'm going off on a tangent here, but one of the biggest mistakes businesses make is they're just so boring and they're so generic and they don't really mean much. That's why they go on a wall or stay in a drawer, and that's it. Whereas the more unique, meaningful, and directional you make them, the more you can own them, and they become an integral part of how you show up and do business.
That's really fascinating. I want to tell you a couple of little stories, one of which relates to you.
Oh dear.
But just about one of them goes back to when people are not in the room and they're talking about your brand, and that's brand. So I, for quite a long time before I started doing this, my Twitter handle was hippie in a suit, right? And the reason was I think I probably started doing a little bit of coaching at that point, and my wife went to a dinner party. I couldn't go, sick child or something like that. And somebody else at the dinner party was trying to describe me to somebody who'd never met me, right? And that got reported back to me. Oh, well, he's like a hippie in a suit. And I loved that, because actually that gets to something about me. I am like business trained up to here. I've been to INSEAD, for goodness sake. But actually, what gives me purpose and meaning is the spiritual path. That's where that comes from. And so blending those two things together it's unique the way that I do it in coaching. It's not completely unique, but that is how I have built everything that I do, is that in one session with a client, I can be taking them through, well, you mentioned the 5 whys, or like the innovators method, or some technical thing to do with like business strategy, at the same time as teaching them breathing techniques and
I love that.
That kind of thing. And the meditation beads are always close at hand, and I have spiritual stuff knocking around, but it's quiet. You wouldn't know necessarily, and that's intentional, because that's how I feel about it, but it took me a while to get comfortable with that. And then the second thing is that the reason why that you've set me off on a path that you probably don't even know that you did this. So when we were at that event, and we were both leaving in a hurry, and I think I said to you, "Oh, let's do a live one day."
Yeah.
And
7 months later.
8 months later, you said to me, "Oh, yes, I'm in a bit of a hurry. Here's my LinkedIn. Let's connect." And then you handed me your phone. And then I said, "Oh, we're already connected." You picked that up, looked at it, went, "That's you." And then you said, "I would never have known, because you're way funnier and way more interesting."
I do remember. Yeah.
which made me absolutely laugh because I love it. When a brand strategist says something like that to you, you better listen. Now, in my case, I already knew that I'd like hacked it together to that point, and I was starting to think, right, let's do this with some intention. So I took it. I just made me. It was hilarious. That was brilliant.
But do
And
you know
it
what?
really,
It's so common though, that, because it's really scary, especially when you're doing your own thing. It's so scary to put yourself out there as a brand, not because, and a brand, when I say put yourself out there as a brand, I mean just who you are. Because in a corporate world, in a business environment, to a certain extent, you are protected. You've got this logo above you and you're protected, and you've got all of these kind of tools around you. You are so exposed when you're stepping out there as you, that actually the first thing you want to do is just stay in this little corporate bubble. Even if I'm putting myself out there aesthetically, you know, the words you use, the formal way you type, it's natural, it's protection. It feels you're vulnerable when you're doing that. And it takes time to build up that confidence in who you are. It doesn't matter what stage of your journey you're at, whether you're just graduating or, you know, you're 50, 60, going into retirement and doing something totally different. It takes time to build that confidence in yourself first. And this is why the inside out branding piece, I will never lose, because if you had a big business, you had 20, 30 people working for you. If you weren't confident, Stephen, being Stephen and stepping out in your true self, it doesn't really matter what the rest of the business is doing, because you're still the figurehead and leading it. So yeah, I just want to validate you and say it's totally normal to do that. My job is to challenge you, and I will always be that kind of holding the mirror up with love and good intentions. Because I just like that, igniting who you are. It's so important. And I think that's my purpose in the world, just to kind of see the potential in others when they're not ready yet to see it in themselves.
Oh, and that is beautiful.
I say it all the time. I'm like, borrow my belief in you until you have that belief for yourself. Because I have a lot of belief in my clients.
Yeah. This is getting clipped up.
I'm like, yes. It's true, because when you're starting out, it doesn't matter. I've got a client that's been in business 7 years, and he's never felt confident to put his true brand out there, personal and business. So it doesn't matter where you are on that journey. It takes people different amounts of time. But when you pull everything together and it feels so authentic, you and the business, it sounds so corny, but like, watch the sparks fly. So Ember's called Ember for a reason.
Yeah. Oh, very good. It's good branding, that. Who was your brand strategist? I'm
well, if you know her.
I just want to like pick up that inside out thing as well. Like, and I've just realized, I think this is why it resonated so much, what you said. So you're a trained coach, and you'll know about the coaching method, which, you know, we've done a definition of branding. Let's have a definition of coaching. For me, it's easier to contrast coaching with mentoring. So if you can take the same problem to a mentor or a coach. Let's say, you know, I'm struggling with motivating my employees. You could take that coach or mentor. A mentor would be somebody that's a bit ahead of you in their career or business or whatever, and they might say, oh, well, that's really interesting. What I would do is X and Y, or when I was in your position, I did ABC. A coach is going to say, oh, tell me more about that. Oh, have you experienced this before? Is this a new thing? You know, they're going to ask you lots of open questions. And the idea is that a coach recognizes that you have the answers inside of you, and the role of the coach is to draw them out. It's not to put them in. Now, that's the coaching method, which I'm sure you recognize. But when I set out in my journey to do this, you think, oh, right, I've got my qualification. I'm a qualified executive coach, and I've learned the methods and so on. But right through the training, I was like, oh, why can't we put meditation in there? Why can't we put, why can't we put this in there and that in there? And what if people aren't ready? And this is the whole basis of my coaching. So my program that I do is called Next Level You. And I tell people, I say, right, if you come to me and you already have a very clear goal, I probably am the wrong coach for you.
Interesting, that though.
Yeah, I tend to work with people who are like, they know it's not this. They have an idea that it might be something over there, but they can't quite make that connection. So I make people spend a whole month before we even talk about goals, exploring who they are. And the whole pillar of my program is called Know Yourself. And that is big S spiritual and values and belonging and what keeps you well and all of that kind of stuff. So that, I think, I just realized when you were talking there that actually what you're doing with brand is going, okay, yeah, you might want your colors and your logos, but first of all, I'm going to challenge you to do some work on yourself.
100%.
Yeah.
Do you know what it is as well? I think people are always looking for a silver bullet when it comes to growth, business growth, right? They're looking for, here's the formula, let me follow it and we'll get the answer. And don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan of structure and process, and we have an Ember process that we put people through. However, it's a structure, it's not gospel truth. So what I believe is every brand is totally unique, and it's my job just to peel back the layers till we get to that kernel in the middle. Yeah. And then we put it out to the world. So exactly the same as what you do. I've got 4-stage pillars: discover, define, design, and disrupt. That discover can be 4 weeks of exactly the same, like workshops, teamwork, independent research, like dig to find out who they are. Because then you don't replicate, you don't imitate, you don't try and fit who you are into the model of, what everyone else is doing. And that's where you get this whole like magic, unique piece that then is really powerful to market. But I think so many people skip this internal work, which is exactly what you do, because they just want someone to tell them how to get that next promotion, right? Yeah. Like, tell me what to do to move on, or what job shall I do? Like, to you, they're coming for that answer. And actually, you'll never get that for that true authentic self without doing that internal work first. You do it for people, I do it for businesses. Yeah. But the outcome ultimately is the same. It's clarity, it's confidence, it's direction, it's ultimately growth. The output is the same. The methodologies might be different, but the thinking, that whole like internal to external, really is aligned. And I love that. This is why we get
I can see that. Like, it's so fascinating that you are also a coach. I think that it so obviously influences what you do, and I can tell that you must be coaching the founder as well at the same time, and maybe not in a formal sense, but you are using that with them.
100%. I mean, I did a couple of years of coaching as well, and I think coaching is just a great tool, whether you're a formal coach like you, or just as a tool within your whatever your workspace is, because you learn to ask questions, and this comes with challenge as well. So I am really comfortable through my coaching experience to challenge and to hear what's not said, to read between the lines, and to know when to peel back that extra layer. And that's where I think a lot of brand strategists hear a couple of things and they stay at this level. Whereas we go really deep, and this can be with founders, it can be with the financial director, the tech guy. It doesn't matter, because whatever the first answer is, it's never the true answer. So I think it's just a case of coaching is a really great skill for anyone to have, to be able to ask the right questions, stop and listen, and hear the true insight, because brand building is based on insight. What's the true insight that we get in here, not what is necessarily said at surface level. Yeah. That's coaching for me anyway.
That is amazing. It's so good. So many synergies. I'm finding this quite funny, actually, because
you didn't know this when you asked me on, did you?
Well, I had a clue that because of the way that you described purpose and values on the stage, it was, I mean this literally. I could have used the words that you used, but I would have been talking about a person, and at the time you were talking about a brand. But what's funny, well, maybe for people watching or listening, Melissa and I don't know each other.
The odd little text, but that's about it. Yeah, I know.
And yet there is huge synergies. Like, honestly, we walked down a corridor and had a chat for maybe 30 seconds. That was it. And we haven't described each other's work to one another. So this is the synergies and the coincidences, well, they're not coincidences, are they? They're following something. And here's what I think. I'm going to go really big and like I'm going to
You've
go
got such a big smile on your face right now. I'm ready for it.
I'm going full hippie. Are you ready?
Oh God. Okay, hit me.
So in the way that businesses have had to evolve over the last, if you go back 100 years, that was when the first corporations, as we understand it, really came into being. But the world was very different then. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have computers. So a lot of work was clerical, manual, and so on. And it was about repetition. So you wanted lots of people in your business who essentially could follow instruction. And they were intelligent people, but following instruction.
Mm-hmm.
And many of those businesses still exist around the world and they do really good work. But what we're seeing now in the 21st century is a totally different way of working. And I think that has accelerated since COVID. And then we got this, and obviously we're talking here primarily about knowledge-based businesses. I'm aware like this is LinkedIn audience. You and I tend to work with knowledge-based businesses rather than, manufacturing and that kind of stuff. Now, in that case, you need people to be able to think for themselves and to make decisions for themselves when nobody is watching and nobody can help them. And how do you guide them? How do people know where the limits are in that kind of situation? Well, it's because the values are clear and the behaviors they witness, they emulate. And I think what's exciting here is the reason that I do what I do is I think you can unlock something inside somebody. It's happened to me. I've experienced it. And I want as many other people to experience what I have as possible. But when you do that and you're doing it with a brand, you're unlocking a level of consciousness in the person or in the team, which connects with this exciting new world that is emerging. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where it comes from. When I hear you talk, I feel it in my heart. My head isn't that engaged. Do you know what I mean? This is not a logical thing. It's all about meaning and purpose and humanity and so on. And in a world where we're increasingly atomized and behind our screens, the feeling to hear you talk and to know that there are other people in the world who kind of like do that. So raising the consciousness of the human race is what I think you're doing, Melissa.
Well, that is something I didn't expect a 10% on a Tuesday morning, but I will take it. I love that. And I think it comes down to connection. So brand building, I'll bring out to brand again. Historically, brands were a one-way dialogue. You'd have a Coca-Cola advertising to consumer. Buy my Coca-Cola, one-way dialogue. The world of social media now means that brands and consumers, it doesn't matter if it's product or service based, have this two-way dialogue. So there's an expectation now that brands need to stand independently as well of the people behind them, but they need to have a consciousness to have a conversation, and people expect to be able to connect to the businesses or the brands that they purchase from, product or service. So it's never been more important for the people behind the brands to have an elevated consciousness, because that is what is required. Never mind kind of, we're talking business here, but just from a human connection point of view, it's a necessary point of interaction that we have to nurture before we lose it. And even down to now, we're talking on obviously LinkedIn and we're talking virtually, but you've already said like, I've made you feel something. So it's not a lost art. We just have to understand how to do it in a way that connects to the hearts and minds of our audience. So that ultimately brand is all about emotion. People buy from people they like, people buy from businesses they trust. Everything is about how you make people feel in your presence or even when you're not in the room. So how do we do that? And you do it in a coaching capacity and spiritual capacity. I do it in a little bit more of a formal setting, but like you said, I do it via osmosis. They don't know they're getting coached and elevated.
Yeah.
But the output of when I work with businesses is confidence. So they have obviously this beautiful brand at the end, but that's not necessarily the thing that gets them the results. What gets them the results is how they then show up.
Yeah.
They are so excited. They have so much internal clarity. They know where they're going. They're lit up, excited. For once, they're all on the same page, singing from the same hymn sheet, and they go out having those confident conversations. That is what will sell, and that is what gets the growth. So they can't do that without connecting to their team, to themselves, to the customers and clients. Like, I think this whole piece around connection, it's always a concern in the world of technology that we're losing that, especially post-COVID. There's been like deep desire to rekindle that connection. And I do think it's something that we need to make sure that we are prioritizing in business. You can do that through brand building, but you can also do that through your coaching and personal connection. So yeah, it just really resonated what you're saying. I was like, that's what we need to look after.
Wow. I think we've gone over the half an hour, and I could.
Oh my God.
I could talk to you for hours, I'm sure. So we're going to have to do this again. I'm going to get you on camera saying, yes, Stephen, I'll do this again.
Yes, I'll do this again. I'm sorry. I can only apologize because I get so excited because the potential in this is massive. And I'm so grateful for you giving this platform and giving me space to just have conversations like this, because A, I love it from a selfish point of view. It gets me excited. But B, I think more people need to understand the power of what you do, what I do. And actually, we can do business in a really conscious, elevating way. And that's the way I choose to do it.
I love that. Well, that's it. That is a beautiful place to end it for today. And you don't need to apologize. It's my job as host to to manage the situation. But it's been an absolute pleasure. But is there any way you would like to direct people if they want to know a bit more about you?
Do you know what? I just think if I can't see who's watching, I've got no idea. But if anyone's enjoyed how I am, because I'm either I love it or I hate it, I'm very high energy and very passionate, just come follow, connect, and send me a DM. I'm a big voice note fan, so just to get to know people better. Fantastic.
Well, I'll draw it to a close there, but just before we do, I want to say thank you so much, Melissa. I have enjoyed this so much. It's taken us too long to organize it, and but it's so wonderful to make a kind of heart connection with somebody in business, if that makes sense. And I mean that in the I genuinely feel that in here, that we're talking about the same things and experiencing the same things. And I would say channeling them as well. You know, neither you nor I invented this. This is the way humanity works, isn't it? It's connection and wanting to feel connected with ourselves. I just have, I think, one final quick question, might not have a quick answer, is that I tend to say to people who come and work with me, one way that coaching works is you just get somebody on a retainer and boom, 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 forever. I don't do it. I'm not interested. There's a values thing. I don't do that kind of coaching. I say to people, look, we're going to work. We're going to go really deep, and we're going to do something that you're never going to do again in your life. And then we're going to go with that. I know, obviously, with brand, there's work to do. There's always ongoing work. But do you feel similar? You do this work, you go really deep, and then...
Funny, I've literally had this conversation this morning. What I do is very much project based. We have some retainer models for certain ongoing creative delivery, let's say asset marketing, stuff like that. But my role within the agency is a 3 to 4 month brand create project. We go deep. I go full on. It's all encompassing. It's a big commitment. But my God, the results at the end are transformative. So that is the way I kind of work. I'm very much a let's go, and I am in your pocket. I am your right-hand woman for that period of time, because I know what happens at the end. It transforms people's whole businesses. And these guys are can be finance. They can be really formal, non-spiritual kind of people. Yeah. But that's where I'm conscious of my energy as well. And I'm a full-on invested energy person. That ongoing piece, we do some of it. It's not my bag. I have people in my team to do that, because I think that deep work is where we get the magic, and that's personally what I love to do. Wonderful. Right, let's leave it there. I just want to say one more time, thank you so much. I think the way that you do what you do is absolutely fascinating, and I find it really interesting, and I follow you
online. I don't always engage with the things that you do, but they've got a great presence about them. And what's been a real pleasure for me today is to get to know, it's not a surprise, we get to realize that the person behind that is the real person. You know, there's some elevated imagery and things like that, of course, but you are, that is you. You know, it's absolutely coming from you.
I try to live my values, you know, so yeah, I'm kind of quite what you see is what you get to a certain extent. So thank you. That's a big compliment.
And so thank you so much for your time. And anybody that is interested, you can watch this live. There's more videos of other interviews on things on Spotify and YouTube as well. So Melissa, thank you so much. I'm going to press the end stream button and I'll see you.
Lovely. Thank you so much for your time.